I would like to call the Flint Board of Education Special Board Budget Workshop to order at 6 p.m. Board members, as I call your name, please reply present for the public record. Diana Wright.
Present.
Betty Ramsdell.
Yes, here.
Danielle Green. Absent. Carol McIntosh.
Present.
Hi, Miss McIntosh. How are you?
I'm good. You guys can hear me then, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Vera Perry.
Present.
Blake Strozier. Absent. And I am present. At this time, the board will hear any comments from the public. Members of the public are reminded that the Board of Education, by its bylaw 1370, is not under obligation to answer questions, make statements, or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such issues will be referred to the interim superintendent for investigation, study, or recommendation. At this time, I will ask Stephen if there are any comments from the public.
Good evening. There are currently no questions and no emails.
Thank you, Stephen. The community is reminded that they may submit their questions by email to FBOE@flintschools.org to have their questions read at the next meeting. Thank you. At this time, I will give the floor to Mrs. Sikelski. She is prepared this evening to address the board members' questions regarding the 2019-2020 final budget amendment and the 2020-2021 initial budget that was tabled at the board cow meeting on Wednesday. Please allow Mrs. Sikelski to present, and she will periodically pause to ask if there are any questions. Mrs. Sikelski.
All right, great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Okay, great. Waiting to figure out how to show my screen. Okay. I have prepared a PowerPoint to go over some information regarding the budget. Hopefully you did receive an email from me earlier today. It was a line by line of the general expenses, not grant or special ed. Everything is under the general fund, but it's been split into 3 sections here at Flint. So I went ahead and sent you that line by line. If you have any questions throughout this presentation about what I'm sharing or about anything that I've sent you, please feel free to ask me. All right. So first, I just wanted to briefly talk about the budget development process and how we as a team in the finance department and as a district really develop the budget. And we always start with staffing. So we look at staffing profiles. There were several meetings between myself, the Executive Director of Human Resources, Mrs. Cassandra Washington, the Learning Support Services Director, Mrs. Melinda Carroll, and the Director of State, Federal, Local Programs, Ms. Kiana Murphy, to ensure that all staff, district and contracted, are properly accounted for and have the correct funding source. So when we are doing that for the upcoming year, we're looking at our projections as far as how many students we anticipate to have in each grade and how many staff members, teachers are needed to be able to work with those students. So district staffing, salary plus benefits in our district represents approximately 58% of the budget. We do have quite a few contracted staff. So the contracted staff make up an additional 13% of the budget. And by this contracted staff, what I'm really referencing here are teachers, parapros, secretaries, the permanent third-party staff that we have throughout our district. This would not be the CSMs or the first student, those contracts. This would be the people inside of the buildings. Fringe benefits and retirement costs for the next fiscal year also reviewed and updated in the staffing profile. In fiscal year 21, so upcoming year, ORS retirement rate increases 2.81, and that will put us at, had my notes, 42.7%, I believe, 42.72%. So for every dollar we're spending on staffing costs, For district employees, we're spending almost 43 cents in retirement costs. Next, I look at grants. I'm in charge of several grants. Ayana Dampre, who's also on the phone or in the meeting, has several grants. And then our local grants, Deb Dixon, the senior accountant, she handles those. And we look at each of those grants individually, and they're all budgeted so that revenues and expenditures equal. Except for our federal grants, we are able to receive some indirect costs, which is additional unrestricted revenue that the district receives. Our grant expenditures are approximately 34% of our overall budget. The next, we look at the special education section of the general fund, which we budget right in conjunction with the Department of Learning Support Services. So what Ayana Dampre, she works on that with Miss Melinda Carroll, and they're looking at staffing is important, making sure that we're offering all of the services that are required to be provided per state and federal law. Looking at the staffing agreements, because this is an area where we do see a lot of third-party staffing coming in, where we have a lot of agreements. So reviewing those and making sure that we have those properly identified. Our learning support services or our special ed expenditures are approximately 19% of our overall budget. Next, I look at the contracted services that we approve annually once a year. Our first student, the CSM, Johnson Controls, Sanitrol are just a few. Bartech is another one. So looking at those contracts and what their costs will be for the upcoming year is an important part of what I look at next. Deb Dixon works hand in hand with Mr. Jamie Foster for our athletic accounts. And we get his input on what sports will be, our students will be participating in the upcoming year, what we'll need for transportation, coaches, umpires, game management. She works with him on all of those. And then our remaining general fund expenditures, such as heating, electrical, office, teaching supplies are just some of the few. Those are also rolled into the new fiscal year, looking at what was spent this year and then rolling as appropriate. Any questions now about the budget development process?
Would you just mention how much we pay in retirement?
42.72%, so almost 43 cents per dollar.
Oh my God.
That will be starting October 1st. Right now we're at 39.91, I think it is. Yep. So we're going to go over 40 cents here in the next year. It's amazing.
I mean, that's just terrible.
Yeah, it really is.
Really just sucks us dry.
Yep, it certainly does. I wanted to talk a little bit about our purchasing process and how that relates to our budgeting. In what we've been able to set up over the past year. Once a department or a school identifies that a service or product is needed, the director or principal would present that purchase to the Board of Education for approval. So you saw a lot of that last week at the COW, and then you'll, of course, hopefully be approving those this week at the regular meeting. If there's no prior approval has been obtained, a lot of our grants have already been brought to you, so if they're grant purchases, they wouldn't have to come for further approval. Once there has been board approval, the administrative assistant would enter the purchase order in Schools Open, which is our new accounting software we just started using this fiscal year. It's the one that's used by the rest of the Genesee County schools. That purchase order is then approved by the director or principal, then submitted to the business office for final approval. So what we're looking for in the business office is that they're using an appropriate account and that they have funds available. Once all of the approvals are received from the board all the way down to our office, then the department or the school is authorized to secure the service or product from the vendor. After that service or product has been received, the invoice, if if the department received it or the building, a written approval to pay by the director or principal, and any backup documents such as packing slips or any other documentation they may have, those are then forwarded to the accounts payable office for payment. And that's when we actually get involved in the process with paying the vendor. So there's several steps that it takes to get that to our office. So now just to talk a little bit about, our enrollment. Apologize, I just did something. Okay, there we go. Our enrollment history and the projections. So we just went back a few years. 2015-16 was the start. We had 5,424.55 FTE. That was blended. And the state of Michigan uses a 10% from spring count, a 90% spring count of the prior year, and then 90% of the fall count of the current school year. And so you can see from 2015-16, we had a little over a 9% decrease, a 7.4, a 6.9. This year was a little bit larger at 11.26. And then what I have projected for next year is a 6.44%. And we're projected FTE to be paid would be 3,531.91 FTE. So that's one of the first assumptions that I have in the FY21 budget. Okay. So we wanted to talk a little bit about our foundation allowance, our history and projection, because this is another big assumption that I have, not only for the upcoming year, but for this current year. So still starting with the 2015-16 school year, our foundation allowance was 7,690. And then we've seen increases every year to last year, FY19, where we had 8,115. Currently, this year, we are receiving $8,326 per FTE for 2019-20. However, due to COVID, the state has indicated that we are 1.2 billion short in the school aid fund at the state level, billion with a B, which equates to between $650 to $700 per FTE reduction.
Oh, man.
So we have not been provided any information about how the state is going to handle this. And so just to be as conservative as possible, I have budgeted the full $700 reduction for this year. If we do receive more, or we don't receive as large of a reduction, I should say, it will only increase our revenue, thus increase our fund balance. So hopefully what I'm presenting here today is a worst case scenario. I wanted to make sure that what I'm presenting, you have facts of how horrible it could be, how bad it could be, and that way you can make decisions on that. And then if it happens to be better, if there's federal dollars received or the state finds money and they don't have to cut as much, then it just allows us to make different decisions, but we won't have to cut back if we didn't budget that. I also didn't budget an increase for next year because with the state being shut down for so many weeks, they're already predicting that sales tax, tax collection are going to be reduced next year. I anticipate we will get, if we do get a reduction this year, we will get some type of increase next year. But again, I wanted to kind of show the worst case scenario, and then if we get better news, then build upon that. Is there any questions about the foundation allowance in my projections?
What if the numbers for the our FTEs do not come up to the 3,500? I mean, you know, you just don't know what parents are going to do.
Mhm.
So have you prepared for that, or what's the plan?
The plan there is a great question, and thank you very much, Ms. Perry. The plan there is really to, one, we're working on a virtual platform for students that are uncomfortable about returning into the building. So we can retain them as Flint Community Schools students. And that way, if they do want to transition back into the traditional classroom, they've been our student all along. It's a seamless tradition. So that's one of our focuses this summer, is to get a platform identified and to allow that option for our students, because we do recognize, I think every district is seeing that might be a possibility. We certainly don't want to lose students because we're not offering that virtual platform. So we are definitely working on that. One of our subcommittees for return to school is actually looking at different platforms right now. So we hope to have, when we announce that final program or return to school plan, we'll have identified all of those. So that is one of our plans right there. And then as we look at, as we start getting enrollment numbers, we'll be working very closely with centralized enrollment. And if our numbers are not where we anticipate them to be, then the executive team will be working closely to identify where maybe we can reduce staff. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank
None
you.
yet from me. I'm just going to kind of save them to the end.
Okay, no problem.
Casey, is that what you want us to do, is wait to the end?
No, I'm just saying, me personally, that's what I'm doing. Keep asking questions as we go along.
I mean, I could wait. Okay.
Shout them out as you go along.
Yes, however you prefer to do it, I'm fine either way. I wanted to talk a little bit about some additional revenue that we have received this year, kind of a one-time revenue. Don't anticipate receiving that in the future. And of course, you know about them. I just wanted you to actually see some numbers. So we did get the tax anticipation note in January earlier this year of $3.9 million. We received a state supplemental, kind of what the state's calling it, of a little over $3.5 million. And the reason for that additional revenue was because it was kind of an FTE smoothing. As you saw a couple slides ago, we saw a really large decrease in FTE this year. And so instead of trying to absorb that hit of loss of revenue in 1 year, it's kind of been smoothed out, and we're repaying that loan through our state aid, over 5 years. So we did receive an additional $3.5 million from the state. And then on June 29th, the plan is to sell the fiscal stability bond, which is $30.6 million. So that will pay off the tax anticipation note plus some interest that has accrued since we've received the money. It'll pay off our 2017 state aid note that we have with PNC right now, a little over $17 million. It'll pay off the 2011 QSAB, which was a capital project we've been paying with our sinking fund since 2011 for the last 9 years, and we owe just over $1.5 million for that. And then of course there's the cost of issuing the bond, which is $532,000. So the one-time revenue that we're receiving in our budget or in our district this year is $14.5 million. So you're going to see that we have a really large revenue for fiscal year 20, but this is a large reason for it, is because of this one-time revenue. Any questions about these revenues?
Could you explain the fiscal stability bond? Wait a minute. Am I saying that right? Wait a minute. Doggone it. It was something that you said, fiscal stability bond. Could you tell us again what that was? I didn't write it.
Oh, no problem. What the fiscal stability bond is what the voters voted for on March 10th. And that's going to take care of basically what we're trying to get it to take care of is that 2017 state aid note, that PNC loan that we've had since 2017. So it's going to pay that off.
I know what it is. I know what it is.
Okay.
You said when that is sold, do we have a buyer or how does that work?
We have underwriters right now. It just went to the market, I believe Friday afternoon. So we have PNC and we have the Siebert team. I talked about them a couple of board meetings ago. PNC obviously is a large national bank, and the Siebert team is out of Oakland County. They're a smaller team that are here in Michigan, so they've been working hand in hand to get all of the documents prepared so that the bond could go to market. So that's happened, and we anticipate that to close on June 29th.
What if it doesn't sell?
I'm not sure that that's really a concern. I haven't heard that as a concern. So I trust that everything is moving along and progressing as it should, and will close on the 29th.
But
Ms. Perry?
yes.
So, like, bonds in this capacity aren't necessarily a, it's not like when you think of like selling a car or selling a house and you have to put it up and then wait for somebody to do. It's much more like kind of throwing chum out into the water. It's going to get eaten up because it's all part of the investment strategy. And so there's, yes, it does sound weird to say we have to sell it. In our head, we hope we have a buyer, but it's one of those things that the buyers are just waiting for something to go up for bid, and that's part of it. So
correct. It's going to be many buyers. It's not one individual or one corporation that buys it. It's many. There'll be many people that will be, buying parts of that 30 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
And right now bonds are selling because the stock market isn't.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that we have a little different in fiscal year 20 are the ESSER funds or CARES. They've kind of been referenced both ways. And the district received about a little $9.4 million. And of that, a little over 1.7 is dedicated to the non-public schools in the city of Flint per federal guidelines. So because these are federal dollars, we're following the same rules as our title dollars, and we have to share with the non-public schools based on how many city of Flint children they have in their schools. These funds have really been budgeted to offset general fund expenses so that the district can fully expend this grant in the current fiscal year. That's our goal for our portion, not the non-public schools. So we have budgeted $6.5 million in payroll costs, which is 69% of the whole grant, $573,000 in transportation, $164,000 in custodial and maintenance, $194,000 in technology, and $356,000 in food service funds. And this is also the grant that Kiana has shared with you last week and is hopefully going for your approval this Wednesday. So that equals an additional $7.7 million of revenue for fiscal year 20 that most likely will not happen again in upcoming years. I just want to talk about those this goes right with that one-time revenue source. Okay. So part of the budget hearing process, so I'll be talking about this on Wednesday too, is the truth in taxation. And make this a little bit bigger. So what we have to do each year is let the city know how much we want to collect in taxes. So this is our L4029. It's already been approved by Genesee County. I sent that in a few weeks ago and we already have our approval there. And then once this is voted on Wednesday, we'll get signatures and send this over to the city of Flint so they can create their tax bills. So our first mill that we levy is 18 mills for just the normal operating on our non-homesteads within the city of Flint. So just to get our part of our foundation allowance from local entities, we levy the 18 mills. We also have a sinking fund. That sinking fund, the current one that we have is actually good for this upcoming year. And we could levy 4 mills, as you can see on the screen. However, we're only requesting to levy the 1.18 mills over here. And that's because we have the extra debt millage for the fiscal stability bond. And we'll be levying 2.82 mills for that. And the sinking fund and the debt mills together will equal the 4 mills as we indicated to the citizens of the city of Flint when they were voting that we wouldn't levy more than that. Any questions on what we'll be levying for fiscal year 21?
Because of the virus, they've withheld so far on foreclosures of homes. But I don't know if that's going to, how much longer that's going to last. So let's say we have quite a few homes to get foreclosed on. How does that affect this tax rate? I mean, this tax rate request.
So that wouldn't affect our foundation allowance, the 18 mills, because if we don't get it from our local entity, the city of Flint in our case, we would then receive the rest of the foundation allowance from the state of Michigan. However, that would affect our sinking fund and our debt mills. So right now, the taxable value of all our property is 708 million. And that's what we would be levying on for the debt and sinking. So if there's some foreclosures, if that taxable property value comes down, then obviously we won't receive as much as what we have anticipated. Another note too on the sinking fund, I forgot to mention today, and we've talked about it prior, but since we're only levying the 1.18 mills, that will only cover basically 90% of it will be going towards the JCI energy bond. The district will actually only receive a very small amount of sinking fund dollars going forward, between 200 to 300,000 based on whatever the taxable value in our collection is. So we're not going to see the same revenue stream from sinking fund that we've seen in the past. Oops. Go back to my, maybe not. All right. So just to give you a quick snapshot of fiscal year 20, the final budget that I'm asking you to approve, we began with a beginning fund balance, a deficit of $3.3 million. Our revenues for the year are over 109 million. Our expenditures are almost 95 million, and that gives us an ending fund balance, a positive $10,740,000. So we end this year as a positive. Whoops, wrong way. This document here has been shared in your board book, if you've had a chance to look at it. The first column is your original budget that was approved last June with the Rainman Group. The first amendment was the first one that I prepared in September. The second amendment is the budget that you just approved in April. And then the final column here is your final budget. And you can see here, we're going to receive for local and state, there's some reduction there. And this 2.4 is almost all contributed to that $700 reduction per FTE. So if we happen to receive more, we don't get as large of a reduction, then we will not see such a reduction in state revenue. The local sources are really just from our local grants not being fully expended. And that gives us, again, that revenue for the year of $109 million. As we go down the list, our basic programs and added needs, these are really the people that are in the classrooms, the teachers, the paraprofessionals. You can see there's a slight reduction. As we're at the end of the year, we took out all vacancies, so we removed those from the budget. Added needs are 100% grant funded, so that's just grants that we weren't able to fully expend in this current year, and that's really due to not being in school the last few months. There are a lot of things that we had planned to do in the classrooms that we weren't able to do because of COVID. As you go down the list, you can see almost every category is you see a reduction. You do see a larger increase in the business area in my department, and that's simply for the bond costs that I just mentioned when we were talking about the fiscal stability. So those are included in there. So you can see we've really reduced expenses in most areas without from our budget that we just approved in April. And that gives us the ending balance fiscal or ending fund balance of $10,740,000. Any questions on this final budget for this year? Okay. So the initial budget for next year, another snapshot. Quickly, we're starting with a fund balance of over $10 million. Our revenues are just a smidge over 60 million. Our expenditures are 73 million, and we end up in a deficit again of $2.1 million. We can go over that.
Why will our, could you go back to that one slide?
Did you want me to talk about it here?
No. Well, I gotta think of my question. Let me see the.
Sure.
Okay. Why are our expenditures going to be, well, what, about 13,000 more? 13 million more, I mean?
Yes, ma'am.
So where is that coming from?
Well, 10.7 will be able to use that fund balance that we have, so we'll just be overexpending by a little over $2 million.
Gotcha. Never mind. Never mind.
Okay.
I wasn't looking at it.
Nope, that's okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if we end up in a, what is that, $1 million+ deficit, is administration going to begin to look at areas for cuts?
Absolutely. This is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this to pull up. This is where we sit today if no cuts or changes are made. So there are some areas that we are discussing as to what we can reduce, what we can reduce, and really having that continued conversation about what does the district look like as far as structurally, like where do we have our buildings, where do we have our students. Those are questions that we need to start having and make some decisions with the board, with the community, to figure out where we can start reducing costs.
So as part of the planning for next year, because I know typically we get an organizational chart along with the budget. Will that be the same this year?
Yeah, I know that part of the organization chart was included in your board packet for the changes that Mrs. Washington was identifying last week. So I think once that has been accepted or whatever the decision is on Wednesday, we'll be updating that and sharing that with the board.
Okay, thank you. I'm going back on mute.
So here we can see the changes from that final budget and how that rolls into our initial. Local state sources, again, are reduced. Now, at this time, we really don't know about a lot of categoricals or state funded grants. We don't know how they're going to, if they're going to offer them next year. So that's where we see that reduction of the 2.9 million and plus the loss of FTE. So losing, I want to say it's 234 FTE. I apologize, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but that's why we see that large reduction. Federal sources, the 7.7, it's almost directly attributed to our CARES dollars that we won't receive next year as far as we know. And then of course the major reduction in the interdistrict and other sources, that would be all of those loans, the TAN, the SAN, the fiscal stability bond. So
I have another question for President.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you know, if according to your budget, you can see where we will be 10 million short, do you know exactly where those different areas are where there's more budget than money?
I mean, it's attributed to all the areas across the budget, so I'm not exactly sure what you're asking.
So you're saying that every department in the system is overspent for next year? We gotta get the food out.
Well, we don't allocate a certain number of revenues to each department. It's looked at as a whole. So we look at all of the revenue sources and then look at, again, just kind of going back to that, how the budget is created. We start with staffing right off the top. So we have contractual room teachers and how many students they can have in their room. We have all of those things that we look at. We have 12 buildings that we staff, so we look at that. Special ed, and I can scroll down to that.
Nikki, her husband, Zoe.
Our special education, we're overspending next year. I mean, right? I mean,
Okay,
there's
gotcha.
$8.2 million right off the top.
Okay, so I get it. Thank you, Ms. Sakowski.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, okay. Why are we, well,
So
why are we just from the top overspending special ed? Is it because we have more students identified now than what our budget can cover?
Correct. Special ed in every district is an unfunded program. So we're required by federal and state law to provide all kinds of different services and to those students, and there's no revenue to support it. And obviously in Flint, what we're finding, and you guys are well aware, is we're disproportionately, we have more special ed students. So we are, working with providing a lot more services than other districts find themselves providing. So just that alone, again, I mean, it almost eats up your whole thing. Our only other area to really look at is again our overhead. We finally have found ourselves in a position where we have really good contracts with our teachers, our paraprofessionals, and our Congress, our principals, our administrators, and but And we look, again, we've gone through these budgets to determine that we have the adequate number of staff for our general ed services. But when, we have so many buildings that we're trying to, our operations budget is $7.7 million. That's just something, an area that we need to start looking at, is how we can identify how to reduce those costs. The other thing to think of, this year looks, it's alarming because we go back into the deficit, but we really, once we take out those one-time revenues, those bonds and the TANs and the SANs from this fiscal year, we overspend this year just as much. It just doesn't look that way because we have all those additional resources coming in, those additional revenue streams. But we're overspending this current fiscal year the very same way we're overspending next year.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How much more will we spend in retirement this year than we did last year? And if you don't have an exact number, it's just, but it is, we will be spending more. Is that not right?
That's absolutely correct.
See, that's just, I think back to when Snyder first made the switch. I think we were only at at no more than 20%. Vera, do you remember exactly how much? I mean, it really jumped when they did the early retirements.
Yeah, it did.
It jumped a bunch. And instead of the state said if you retire early, we'll give you a boost in your retirement. And instead of the state doing that, they passed that, and I think it was like 5 or, I mean, it was a large amount. We go back that up. But so, and since there's fewer teachers paying into the retirement fund because of charter schools, we are paying so much more. So that's just going to continue. It's just going to continue to get worse. That somehow the state, or if we're looking to who we're going to support and doing what, or what we need to have our congressional committees bring up, is how much school districts, because eventually this will shut down school districts, period. I mean, it already has a couple of them. I think Kalkaska was the first one that was one of the big ones. They actually, because how much we're paying in retirement, that's almost 50% of every dollar we pay to anybody who's working for us, which when somebody asks, that's why we need our own custodians or secretary, we can't afford them because that would add that much more. So if you at some point, just give us the figure, you don't have to do it right now for me, but if you would just at some point, just to give us a talking point with the state government.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Thank you.
I think you're right. I think it was a perfect storm. So there was the early retirement, there was the increase in charter schools, and they get to play by a different set of rules, and they're not required to participate in ORS like we are. We have to. And then as those costs started to rise, then more districts started looking towards using third-party contracting. So then that reduced the number of people putting into ORA. So then that in turn drives it back up. So I think it's just a perfect storm of a lot of things that right now we're paying 43 cents on the dollar. And that's not even including your normal Social Security taxes that you pay too. So we're paying well. We are now paying over, or we will be, paying over 50 cents a dollar between FICA and retirement. And that doesn't include any other fringe benefit that we offer our staff. So, right, how long can this be sustained? That's a great question, and I will be happy to give you the difference in retirement costs from this year to next year. Yep.
You use the term as the perfect storm, but because we're on public, I'm not going to tell you the term that I would.
You had a different storm in mind, huh?
Really, that administration dumped all of this, and it it hid it under the auspice of, if we retire all these older teachers, you'll get younger teachers and pay them less. Except you have to pick up the cost for all of it. If we wanted to do that, we could have said that ourselves as opposed to upping the retirement fee. So somewhere, public schools, those of you that go to meetings, etc., somewhere that there has to be some kind of resolution for that, because you simply, I don't care how much money your district has, you simply can't continue to work under those circumstances. It's just a downhill slide, and then we end up cutting so much because we can't afford to pay for the retirements, and yeah, so that is going to be a real issue. I'm retiring, so I mean that still will be a big concern for me that everyone is going to have to deal with. So I don't want to lose sight of that, just because I think people think, well, you're just overspending and there's something you can do. No, we're getting again, I won't use the word since we're getting cheated out of the money that is due us, and we're paying off the state's problems.
Yep. Any other questions about the initial budget for next year? All right. I'm going to go into the food service budget and the student activities budget. So did anyone have any general fund questions they want to ask, or did you want to wait until I was done presenting those other two budgets?
We can wait, I would think.
All right, perfect.
I mean,
These ones
let
are,
me say it that way.
these ones are a lot quicker. Yep, okay. So the food service budget, Mrs. Ayana Dampre works with the food service Sodexo team and prepares these budget. And you'll see that is one of the changes on the organization chart. When you get that, you'll see that food service has been moved underneath of her, the Deputy Director of Finance. So as she oversees what they're doing and works hand in hand with them and with MDE, because obviously there's a lot of MDE components with their contracts. So the first column here is the original budget that was approved last June of 2019. And then we did not do an amendment on food service. So the change to our final budget, you can see there's a large increase in federal resources, revenues because of COVID, because we're serving so many more meals than we normally would have in a school year. So we've seen quite the increase, and we kind of talked about this, I believe, possibly last week at our meeting. We actually are going to, our food service fund will benefit from this unfortunate situation, but that's because we've been able to reach more people, more children in the whole community than what we normally would have. So we will have revenues in the food service fund for fiscal year 20, just a little over 5 million. You can see operations and maintenance, those are our heating cost over there, those types of things. Food service, the 5.1, that's what we're on track to spend to spend on Sodexo contract. And then the capital outlay, we're still working on that kitchen. It's not 100% complete. We had to finish up some work this year, and there's still some projects moving forward that need to be done. So we do show we're spending a little bit more than what we're receiving, and that's simply due to working on central kitchen and getting that up to par. And that leaves us with an ending fund balance of $484,000. Our fiscal year 21, next year, our initial budget, again, you see kind of that decrease. We anticipate obviously feeding less children last year because our FTE will be decreasing. And of course, we won't have the additional, hopefully we don't have the additional from having to provide food the way that we have the last few months. 50,000 again will be what we're just spending on overhead costs at the kitchen there, and 3.5 million will be spent for Sodexo is what we're budgeting, which gives us a revenues over expenditures of $150,000. So remember, part of that contract with Sodexo is the $200,000 guarantee. That wouldn't obviously take into account the bills that don't go through Sodexo, which would be that 50,000. So that's where we have that revenue. And that'll leave us with a fund balance of $634,000. Any questions on food service?
What is the holdup with the kitchen being completed? Was COVID part of it? But it seems like we've been dealing with this for 2 years. So where's the problem?
Well, funding has been a problem. Before the COVID and the additional revenues we've received are basically the project cost a lot more than I think was originally anticipated. And so we have been just trying to work through that, getting them what they need, but also at the same time trying to get the revenues. So right now, Ayana and Michael Williams from Sodexo, they're working on an equipment grant because there's still things that need to be done over there. And I don't think JCI mentioned too much about what needed to be done in food service, but I know they have a lot of heating concerns over there, and just airflow issues in that, even in their wing of the building. So it's something that will have to be addressed at some point.
Yeah.
How much over budget are we?
Oh gosh, Ayana, would you happen to know that? I'm not even sure what the whole project was.
I don't have the exact number, but this 275,000 that we planned for this year was over and above. I believe the original project was $1 million, and this is an additional 275 right now. And I know that we still need ovens. There's some electrical work that needs to be done. They do have a lot of heating and cooling issues over there that we still have to take care of. And there's also some equipment that will have to go in different schools that we need. So that's what we're trying to get the equipment grant for.
I think we need is Mrs. Stewart on the line?
Yes, ma'am.
I think we need to have some type of a meeting about that kitchen, just even to hear what Mrs. and I hope I don't want to kill your name, but Dupree.
Dumpray. Yes, ma'am.
Just hearing what she's saying, additional things, I think we need to have a meeting on this to see how much, well, the original amount, how much we've spent thus far, and then how much more we have to spend.
Yeah. We have,
Go ahead, Betty.
you know, everyone we've had from with the architects has gone over budget. Every one we've had. I think we need to have a discussion about that, because we were supposed to be able to have the ovens go with us. There was supposed to be nothing happen. And then this was supposed to be, and oh yeah, that'll be fine. And TGA, is it TGA? Remind me.
I don't know who's doing this.
No, well,
THA.
THA. Okay.
Yeah, okay, but every time we go over budget. I just really think we need to look at using, if we have to use an architectural firm, I think we need to give somebody else a shot at this, because their bid is one thing and their cost is totally another, with more zeros.
Yeah, Casey.
Yes, ma'am.
I like to hear.
I would like you and Anita to have a discussion, and we've got to have a meeting on this. This is ridiculous, and
Yep.
I'm not. This by no means am I trying to smash, for lack of a better word, my brain isn't ticking, administration. but we need to have some discussion out here and see what the heck is going on.
Yes, we really do.
May I get in here
Absolutely.
after this? Cindy?
Carol's
Yes,
trying
ma'am,
to
Cheryl.
And Blake
Um,
needs to see
I
understands.
just want to say this to my fellow board members. And I'm not exactly sure how things have been getting done as far as the bidding, but I'm going to go back to what I always suggest. We need to get a competitive bidding process, like how they have even the city. Everybody does it. They have three different companies come out and bid, not on the same day, so they can sit in the car and negotiate it, as one of my board members insinuated in the past when I brought this up. If you have three different companies, nobody knows when nobody else is coming, who's already bidded. Somebody's going to tell you something that somebody else didn't tell you. What they know is we're locked in to these certain companies. They see we're pushing for them. They come in, they low bid, they low ball the bid. They know when they make these bids that it's going to cost way more than that. Okay? They already know this. And they also know once they rip our walls out, we're a school. Once they rip our walls out and tear our ceilings up, we have to get those things fixed. We can't leave them like that. We're bound by the state for to live up to a certain criteria. So once they get us in the sling, then they know they can take advantage of us like they always do. We have to have three different bidders. It's the same thing as the boilers, because we were told that the air and stuff will be working in centralized kitchen when we had the other boilers addressed. Like Ms. Ramsdale said, that was supposed to include ovens, electrical, and all these things. Ventilation, it was going to be prepared, and that's why we were only using one end of the building, because it was going to be up to par, but we couldn't afford to do the rest of it. And here we are again, just like Scott and just like everything else. And it's because, like I said, if you use three different companies, if I have Miss Perry come one day, Miss Diane come one day, and Miss Ramsdale come another day, and I don't tell her whom I've already spoke with, and I have her look at the same job, everybody's going to tell me the same thing, A, because they're doing a complete job, or they're going to tell me something different because somebody's going to address something somebody else didn't address. And that way you can kind of get some information and make an educated decision if somebody's messing you around. And we're not taking advantage of the opportunity to catch these guys in a swoon, because it's the same thing as our boiler over there at the administration building. When the guy only fixed part of it and he didn't tell us that it was another portion that had to go with it to make the new part go. So then we were bound in to get the next part done because what we paid for wasn't going to go. So it's just the same old thing. We have got to get people who will come in and give us their most honest estimates. And like I said, somebody's going to tell you something today that the guy yesterday may not have told you. With three different people, somebody's going to give you more information than somebody else. And then we'll be able to make a better observation as to how much these things are going to cost. But if we just keep putting our eggs in one basket and always leaning towards this guy or that guy because we've used them in the past, then we're going to keep getting the same result. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. McIntosh.
So did you hear me, Casey?
I did, about making sure to set up a meeting with Anita and administration.
Yeah, I think, because I'm quite sure administration is frustrated because they have to bring it to us and they know we're going to say something.
Yeah. Oh, and Blake could be part of that since that's his field, and he makes some of the same comments that we do. I mean, he has some of the same thoughts. If you want, I mean, that's up to you guys.
Well, I said the whole board. I said to have a meeting with the board.
Okay.
Okay, all right, great. Are there any other questions about, oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying noted. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Carey.
Thank you. I think it's great questions and great concerns. I know Ayana has been speaking with Michael and Bernard about the kitchen there and about how all of that, those decisions were made just so we can have a better understanding too, since we're coming in after the project had started. So we're definitely asking the same questions, and we'll hopefully get you some good information.
Thank
Were
you.
there any other questions about the food service final budget for this year or the initial budget for next year?
I
Yeah,
have,
I have one more question. I'm sorry. The stuff that we have left to do, like the ventilation for centralized kitchen, everything that we have to do to get that project to be operable and complete, are we going to itemize those things so we can kind of get a forecast of what we need to complete that project? Because eventually, like you said, we got to get the work done. So do we have any type of forecast as to what it's going to cost for completion? Did we go over that?
We did not, but Ayana, can you speak to that? Have you went into detail about how much the remaining project is going to cost?
So no, we haven't gone through and said, okay, we know we have a few items that we know we need to pay for. So we know we need a few, some ovens, and we need some other equipment. But we haven't gone through and said, okay, if everything is 100% complete, this is how much it costs. But if that is something that you guys want, I can work on that.
yes.
Yes, I would like to know. I'd like to know so we won't have to every month get an extra surprise and an extra surprise. Let's get one big surprise.
Okay, so my question would be, would you also like us to include the ventilation and the heat and the cool the building and be all encompassing?
Yeah.
Everything.
Everything it's going to take to make that go right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll get you that information and pass it along, and then maybe we can have a workshop regarding where that project is and where what we need to finish that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah, don't do that. And then, okay, just our student activities budget. So our student activities, this is.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello? I'm sorry, but I thought I had unmuted myself, and I was trying to ask a question while you were still on Central Kitchen. So
Sure.
My question is concerning Central Kitchen, and I was hearing that we need additional ovens and other things for Central Kitchen. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So and I guess my question is, are these things additional that someone has added, or were they part of the original plan on which our budget was based?
Good question.
So I can't answer that question because I'm not 100% sure what was in the budget when the original plan was put together. But my conversation with the food service director was.
Okay, you went out on me. I can't hear you. Hello?
Yeah,
I think we lost her.
Yeah.
I think she lost us.
Okay, because I think before we spend any more money on Central Kitchen, we need to go back to the original plan, the original budget, and understand why at this point we will be adding additional equipment in there.
Right.
I'm sorry, can you guys hear me right now?
Yes.
Now we can.
Okay, so what I was saying is that I tried to speak with the food service manager, and what he explained to me was that the equipment that was used in the original Central Kitchen upgrade wasn't new equipment. So it was old equipment, and now that equipment isn't functioning well, and so now we need new equipment.
Well, I think there needs to be more discussion about that, because he just can't decide to add things like that without coming to the board. I mean, that's just my thinking, because those are the things that keep increasing costs. And they were the ones that determined that the old equipment would work in the new kitchen. So
We certainly wouldn't be purchasing anything without bringing that to the board. So,
Okay. All
yeah, we understand, you know, there's a needs list and a wants list. And so if we were to bring you something, it would definitely be because it's absolutely needed. So we certainly wouldn't be purchasing anything without your full approval.
Right, and I think we need to have rationale and why isn't the old stuff not working when you said it would, and a whole lot of answers need to be brought to the table.
And is it a possibility for the old ovens to be repaired?
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, and you know, and I'm sorry everyone, but I'm gonna have to log off, and I will see you on Wednesday night.
Take care. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
I'm going to ask the other board members to think back on this. Vera, I think you probably were here. It seemed to me, I seem to remember that they thought that would work, but then there were some things from the old kitchen that were too old to move in. And then this goes back to Larry, or right after with Tawab, that was brought up because that old kitchen had been there. By the way, it's gone. If you've driven by there, it's all gone. But that old kitchen, the stuff was way too old. And I think there was some other equipment, either the dishwasher, something else. But there were some things going back that that goes back. So be prepared for that kind of answer that we told you back when, and that somehow, so that I can't, do you remember hearing that at least, Vera, or am I just?
That was Tawab and Weatherspoon.
Right. Okay.
Uh-huh.
That seems right. So that will go back that far. So when whoever goes in and speaks to them, there could have been some amounts given at that time or something, but that just because I'm remembering, I just think it's, the more you can take into the meeting with you, the less surprised you are about anything. So that's why I bring it up now. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Are there any other food service questions? Okay. So the last budget that we prepared is the Student Activities Fund, which is new for this fiscal year with GASB 84. We've mentioned that a few times. So basically that's where we took all of the schools, they had their own checking accounts, and we brought them all in-house, and for them to spend the funds, they follow the same purchasing policy and procedures as any other dollar that the district expends. You know, they're putting in purchase orders and they're providing invoices. So this has been a new fund for the district, and as a lot of work has put into it to get it up and running. Again, your original budget was approved in June of 2019, and the final budget here for FY20 is a little bit different. You can see a large increase in revenues, and simply this is because the district had a scholarship fund, and not a scholarship fund, a trust fund that has been in the district for several years. So because those are not true trusts that are set up, they've all been moved into the Student Activities Fund. So your Freeman Fund, your Doyle Ryder funds, all of those, they're just now housed under this one fund. So that's why you see the large increase in the revenue, the $865,000, is because we're just bringing all of those accounts together into one fund. They didn't actually go out and earn that much money this year, the students. It's just bringing those all together.
Yeah.
Student activities. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but aren't we going to pay those funds back?
Yeah, these are revenues. This is revenues, so it's just creating the fund.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Nope, that's okay. Yep. Yeah, so we're just on the revenue, so just, that's why it's so large, and then next year, if we just kind of jump ahead to the initial 65,000, that's what we anticipate that the students will actually fundraise or, receive as students if they go out and fundraise is 65,000. We don't anticipate, the 865,000 every year. That's just because we're bringing the two funds, we're kind of merging the two funds together. This year, the students spent, or we're anticipating them to spend 113. It's not an exact cost yet because we're still getting a few graduation invoices in, but it's real close to the 113. And so next year, we anticipate them spending 135. They have a lot of funds or different groups, I shouldn't say funds, excuse me. They have a lot of different groups that have money they weren't able to spend this year due to COVID. So we anticipate those groups spending more of their money next year than possibly what they bring in, which is completely fine. That money is there for the students to do their activities, and that's what we want them to do with it. So that fund balance for the end of this year looks like it'll be a smidge over $1 million, and the next year, FY21, we believe we're budgeting a little 960,000 there.
Question.
Yes.
All classes tend to, they buy something to donate to their school that they've graduated from. My memory fails me to be able to say who has bought what in the past couple of years. Do we know if the class of 20 has, if some of this is their money and they wanted to buy something that they would, it's like maybe,
it's like the thing out in front of Central, the sign that says Central Indians.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah, that they did that. But Vera, I don't think a class has made that kind of donation in quite a while. Not to my memory, but my memory can come and go.
I thought somewhere between 17 and 19, I thought one of those classes had purchased something. It wasn't huge, but they had purchased something. And I was just wondering if the class of 20 had any idea, and if it, or is there some way that can be researched to see if they wanted to, and if they did, does that purchase come from this money that's sitting there?
But with each activity has its own, so the fund balance we're anticipating to be a little over $1 million. That's made up of, I'm trying to think of how many different activities. I want to say we're close to a couple hundred or over a couple hundred. I would say between 200 and 300. So each group has, we track that all individually. So the class of 2020, they have their balance. They have not indicated or put in a purchase order for anything that they'd like to spend their remaining money on, but I'm not sure that they're done spending money because everything has been postponed. So I'm not sure that they are to that point yet where they're ready to say, okay, we're done using our funds. We would like to do this with it. So definitely can reach out to Mr. Akanicki and talk to him about that to see if that's something they'd like to do, because I'd really like us to get in that process of, okay, the class year is ending. We don't want to keep 2020 funds in a 2020 account. Do they want to donate it to the class of 21, or do they want to buy something, a tree, or something like what you're referencing here? Do they want to do something and donate it to the district in a different way? We'd really like to see that become more of the process as the classes start graduating, so that we're not sitting on money from 1996 and here we are in 2020. So we are working on that, but definitely I'll reach out to Mr. Akanicki and see if he's heard of anything and if they think they're done spending their mony.
Just as a matter of curiosity, like if they decided they would go ahead and have a prom somehow, that there's money, that they have money for that in that account, Do you know?
There's a prom account and there's a class of 2020 account. So they have spent some of their prom money. I'm not exactly sure where those conversations are as far as holding the prom, but they have spent some of their funds, you know, with the vendors that they're hoping to use to have prom.
Good, okay. I hope they can. I really hope they can.
Me too. Me too. All right, well, those are the three, well, there's actually six, but the three different funds, budgets, the final for this fiscal year, the initial for next year. And that's all that I had to share with you, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
I have one.
Yes.
Okay,
we talked at one point about what we could use. When you said at some point, you know, we obviously have had to send money back, about being able to hire parapros, et cetera, out of the title funds, or somehow being able to use up more of the title funds. I don't know where that is. I'm sure you probably have had a difficult time answer, but is that still in the hopper? Is that still questions about what we can and can't use title funds? If we can expand the use of that, it would take some of the pressure off the general fund.
Right, so this current fiscal year, and we are also doing this in the upcoming year, this was actually worked on prior to my arrival, but I know Anita's group and Kiana's group and HR worked really hard on identifying what part of a teacher's day could be used by title dollars. And so when the teacher is providing intervention services, so we do intervention for reading, the Success for All, and then we also have a math program that we're using for intervention. When they're doing those activities, we actually can charge that to the title fund. So our general funded teachers, very few of them, K through 6, are 100% funded at all in the general fund. A lot of them have a percentage that are in the Title I grant, and that has been a really good cost savings for the general fund. So that's already in place, and it seems to be working very well. And again, we're able to provide that intervention to our students, and they desperately need that.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's a good answer. I like that answer.
The that paper you sent us, that information, the board budget.
Yes.
I don't ever remember seeing this, and if I did, it's been so long ago. Can you please explain this? I'm not saying you have to go through all that stuff, but just could you please explain this?
Sure, I'd be more than happy to. All of the revenues, which are at the top, they're in a negative, so it looks like they're taking away, but actually those are the revenues, and they're negative because revenues are a credit in accounting. But every revenue source, except for the local grants, those are all together in one line. Those are line by line, all the revenues that we anticipate to receive this year and for next year. And I say anticipate for this year, it usually in June 15th, I know exactly what our revenues are, but unfortunately, due to the state of the school aid fund, I'm not able to accurately predict what we're going to receive. But all of the revenues are there, so they're all the negatives. And if you see the totals of local revenue, if you were to compare that to the budget that you approve, those will match right up side by side. Then we get into the instructional part of expenditures. So your 111s, 112s, and your 113s. If you look at the accounting structure that's on the left, those are all our teachers, all the people that are actually in the building. When there's a line by line, it means it's not grant covered and it's not a special ed cost. So that's kind of the general expenses of the general fund budget, because we kind of split our general fund budget into general, special ed, and grants. And then you'll see all of the grants and special ed there. I don't show them line by line. If I did, this document would be about 4,000 lines long. So just because we kind of look at the budget in those separate ways, this is my budget where I combine them all, but without the detail of the grants and special education. So the first section you see are the teachers. Your next section is all grant funded. That's your added needs. And so those are things that are all funded by grants. Your next section, you're looking at your pupil services. So different, what do I want to say is in there? Your counselors, your librarians, your central enrollment staff, those are kinds of things that you find in that area. Then you move down to the board, the 230s, which is your board and your superintendent area. You see that section. 240s are your principals. So you'll see your principals, their secretaries, and building expenses, their office supplies. The 250s are my business office, so the costs that are associated with running the finance and business department. Your 26s, you might want to pay attention to that. That's your big one. That's the $7 million one for operations. What you have in there are your costs of your operation director, secretary, your consumers bill, your phone bills, all of your CSM, all the vendors that are keeping your buildings open, and in the work on those things. Your next area, there 27s, that is transportation. So that's what we're spending for first student, our transportation vendor. Your 28s are your central office, central office, so your HR department and your IT, those are kind of in that area. Your 29s are your athletics, so that little section there, about 20 lines or so, everything to do with athletics is in there. Let's see, 29. So then we go into the 300s, and those are our community things. So you see a lot of grants in there. That would be like your Title I, your parent advisor groups, all of those things happen in that area. And then at the bottom are your indirect costs. And I talked about those a little earlier today in our presentation. We do get some indirects from our federal grant, so that's unrestricted revenues. And then our loan payments are there. And that kind of takes you to the end where everything is tallied up and matches the recap or the board budget that you actually approve for what we have for fund balance, our total revenues, our total expenditures, and what we have for fund balance. Does that kind of help you look at that document?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
AC.
Ms. Perry. Ms. Ransfeld, do you have anything else that you'd like to discuss?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the answers that I've gotten and the help.
Ms. McIntosh?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. I'm going to look my packet over and be prepared for Wednesday. If I could get those questions asked that I previously mentioned, I'll be fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Kelsky, I have a couple things that I want. So, do you know off the top of your head what the average cost of labor for the national is? I mean, what's the national average? If we're right around the 58 to 60% labor cost, what's the average?
Actually, you usually see it a little bit higher, usually around 80, 85%. And, but again, I didn't include our food service, transportation, our CSM. I didn't include those contracts in those percentages, so we would be higher too. In a school district, I don't think that's a national average, I should say in a school district in Michigan, you're typically 80, 85%. So I'm sure if I added in those contracts, obviously we would be getting very close to that number.
Yeah, that's fascinating to think about. I mean, coming from, you know, the restaurant industry or the business world, I remember my budgets were, I mean, 18, 19% labor. So it's such a drastically different world than what I'm accustomed to. It's shocking. The 43% for retirement, that's not national, right? That's just state of Michigan?
State of Michigan, ORS, yep.
Okay. I mean, the good thing is at least we're not the only person that's going to be suffering from that. There's going to be school districts across the nation. That was already kind of brought up. And then you said kind of anticipate a worst case scenario of a roughly $700 per pupil allotment cut.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Did you say that you're anticipating a worst case scenario around a $700 per pupil allotment cut?
Yes, yes. What I wanted to definitely make sure was that regardless of what happened, your budget will only get better. Your foundation allowance will only increase. I did not want to present a budget to you today that when the final is here, it was worse than what you approved. I did, that was, you know, my ultimate goal. So I'm giving you worst case scenario today in hopes that it will be better. But if that happens, then we're just in a better position. So that was my goal and why I did the 700. Lots of districts are doing 650. I mean, what's $50, right, at this point? But a lot of districts are doing the multiple year. Some are doing a little bit of an increase for next year. But at this time, without any guidance from the legislation, I just felt it was just best to be safe and do the $700 per year.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of get off on a small soapbox for a second when I say how disgusting it is that we live in a place where businesses are getting bailouts while education is getting budget cuts. We're in a system or a situation where people are arguing about funding for systems that are brutalizing people, and the easiest and best thing we could do is just spend more money to help educate everybody to lift them out of whatever issues. It's so frustrating and disgusting that it makes me want to scream. So outside of that, talking about the bond a little bit, do we know, are we anywhere near understanding where like the interest rates are and stuff? I know it was kind of obviously fluctuating and now it's changed drastically. So do we know what the bond interest is going to be?
The bond interest rate, I don't know that off the top of my head, but I'll be more than happy to look that up and share that out with you.
Okay, and then the sinking fund JCI revenue reduction, can you explain that to me a little bit? Is that part of the, I know it's part of the self-funded renewal, so do you mind just touching on that, just a 2-second overview?
So, right, we're going to be collecting 1.18 mils in the sinking fund, and most of that will be to pay the energy bond that is going to pay the JCI bill. So that will be taken right off the top. I won't see, all of those dollars will go straight to our trustee at Huntington Bank. He'll hold those all sinking fund dollars until we have the yearly payment accrued, and then we'll get back, like I said, roughly between $200,000 to $300,000. So part of the energy fund, what we're hoping to see is that we will see a reduction in our heating costs and our electrical costs because we're more energy efficient, right? That was the whole purpose of the project. And I think also to regulate, you know, our buildings and get them in a condition where, you know, students can actually learn instead of, you know, having a hot flash one moment and then freezing the next. So we're going to hopefully see a reduction in those costs. I didn't budget any reduction for next year. I actually held them steady because typically you do see an increase in those costs every year, but I held them steady because hopefully we do start seeing some reductions. I'm not sure how long it's going to take JCI to finish the project, so we'll be able to then start looking to see what our savings are from doing these different projects in every building.
Yeah, remember that, and I'm sure you do, that they, to the best of my knowledge, there was a guarantee in regard to the self-funding. So I would really like to make sure that if we have a building that's completed, we make sure to judge apples to apples where we were the year previous to where we are currently, because if I remember right, when I first came on the board is when we started doing this, and I believe that came with a guarantee. Please double check on that, because I just want to make sure that we can specifically point to there absolutely is a reduction in energy costs. So that just popped into my head as we were talking. So, okay. My last question, so the Freeman Fund and the other funds that we have for the schools, do we have contact with the fund managers for that? My concern about lumping them into one sum, one account, is that if they're specifically laid out for an individual school and we lump them into one sum, and we can no longer specifically say these are the funds that were used allocated to this specific school, I don't want to disrespect the initial wishes of the people who set the funds up. So are we able to, I mean, do we speak to the fund managers? How does that work?
No, they're not, we certainly know exactly what funds are Freeman. They're in the same bank account, they're in the same fund, but they're all, every activity in the Freeman funds and the Olga Barak funds that we'll be receiving, they're all separated out in our accounting software. So we most certainly will know what Freeman funds are, we'll know what class of 2020 funds are. We will have them all separate. It's just they're in one fund in our accounting software and in our audit, our financial statements, and they're in one bank account for ease of use, but they're most certainly separate. Those funds are not a true trust where they're set up like with their own trust employee identification number. They're kind of just exactly like the Olga Barak, I hope I'm saying her name right, where they've gifted the money to the school. They've given us parameters on which they would like them to be used. The Freeman funds, they'd like them to be used at the Freeman building. The Doyle Ryder Fund, same thing. Olga Barak is the college readiness. So we know their intent, but they're not truly a separate trust with a separate EIN. So that's why they come all together under that student activities fund, but they're most certainly kept separate.
Okay.
Well, didn't we take those? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Ms. Perry.
Didn't administration take that money and you're supposed to be paying that money back?
Yes, those monies will be paid back as soon as we can get this energy bond sold, which looks like I think it's going to be the end of July. But yep, those funds will be restored to that account.
I have a Casey, were you finished? I'm sorry.
Go right ahead. It happens to be that I was, but yes, Ms. Perry, I'll always yield for you.
No, you go ahead and get finished.
No, that was it. Like I said, it just so happens I was done.
Okay. I have a request. The next time we go into funds that have been designated to the different schools, the board needs to know that information needs to come to us. This floored me. I can't speak for anyone else. This floored me because we never knew about it. So that's the request I have. Anytime you're taking money from somebody, the board, especially those types of funds, the board needs to know. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Well, yes, ma'am. Everything, because of the purchasing, how purchasing policy is set up, everything will be coming to the board. Since this was something that was arranged, this whole JCI and the down payment was all done prior, I thought it had come to the board when the JCI project had been approved, which was way before I arrived on site. So I didn't realize that it had not been to the board. I was given direction in the understanding that we were good to go. And that was the direction I was given by my supervisor. So it wasn't until I was questioned about it did I realize that the board did not know that that was what was happening. So Again, those monies are coming back, but if we were to spend anything, the direction has been very clear from the board. Even at a student activities, you do want those to come before you for approval, so that most certainly will happen going forward. And I do apologize for that misunderstanding, but again, I you know, because I hadn't been here, I relied on the information of someone that had been here.
I appreciate that. Two other things. Number one, could we get a copy of the presentation you did tonight? I'd like to have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then next, and this is off kilter, I know we approved the monies for the plexiglass. So are we going to put the plexiglass in all the departments? I know we started out with central enrollment because this week, I believe that's when they're going to, the parents can come in now and start enrolling their students. But is HR, superintendent's office, whatever in business office, like maybe where Dara sits, are all these places going to get plexi?
I believe that's our intent. We're working through that right now in those subcommittees of the return to school. Part of that's the facilities. And I believe we're working through not just our administration, but also what buildings are going to need as far as, you know, the plexiglass and those types of things to help protect everyone. So I think that's our intent, is to move along. I don't think it's been scheduled at this point, but I know that we've definitely had discussions about it, and that is our intent to move forward with that.
Thank you. I'm done, Casey.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all questions needed.
I'd like to say you've done a really good job. Well appreciated. I thought the meeting went very well, and you gave us lots of answers. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask one question, please, President Lester? Carol mentioned a couple, Trustee McIntosh mentioned a couple of questions that you were hoping to get answered before Wednesday, and I'm sorry, I do not have those written down. Could you let me know what those are, please?
Carol.
Yes. What was the question? I'm sorry.
Well, yep, I was just asking about, you had mentioned you had a couple of questions you're hoping to be answered before Wednesday, and I'm sorry, I did not write those down. Could you repeat that, what your question was?
They don't have to be answered before, well, I guess they probably need to, but I wanted the complete numbers for the central kitchen. I wanted to know, and concerning those funds that Ms. Perry is shocked about, I would like to know how much and when, and, you know, basically how it was authorized. Just questions about how this budget is moving.
So you're speaking of the Freeman and Noel Ryder funds?
Yes, I am, and I'd like to know the complete numbers for the centralized kitchen, and I'd like to see the numbers that we were given prior to, because like Ms. Ramsdale said, a lot of this wiring and stuff like that, and ventilation, that was supposed to be included, and I'd like to know how much we are over and what is going to be the cost of the completion for the project, because I think we need to know those things before we get to making an official budget concerning centralized kitchen. I don't want to keep, you know, baby stepping it. Let's just get the whole thing over with, find out what the real number is.
I'm not sure that we'll be able to get you the complete numbers of what exactly is done, but I do want to just point out, in our initial budget for food service, we currently don't have anything budgeted to spend. So you would not be approving for any additional things to be done at this time, because we're working on an equipment grant with the state of Michigan. And then we also need to further that conversation with Northwestern in the board's decision of what are we doing with Northwestern? And I think that's going to drive the heating and the cooling part of what we need to do for centralized kitchen too. So
let me understand this. So is the possibility of moving central kitchen on the floor?
we definitely can provide you information about moving that. We've had those conversations with the vendor to discuss what that would look like. But again, I think it really rests on the decision that you make with Northwestern.
Okay, well, regardless of what decisions we make with Northwestern, we know we have to have a kitchen somewhere. I would like some type of idea of what we're looking at, period, concerning dollars, because that's it's necessary, it's a must, and we have to pay for it. So I don't know how we're possibly even thinking about a budget without having some dummy figures to plug in there, because it's got to happen. We need some type of idea about it. We just can't just not address it, can we?
Did you hear me, Carol, when I asked for us for president and superintendent to have a meeting so we can discuss all of this? And then Mrs. Wright said the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want
Okay,
a meeting on the original amount and what is remaining for Central Kitchen.
Right, and what has to be done to complete that job. Regardless, even if we all get together and have a meeting, I still need some information. Once I get to the meeting, you're still going to need to know the numbers to some of those things, I would think.
So this is Ayana, and I wouldn't be able to provide you a complete number before the meeting on Wednesday. And the items that we are trying to get the equipment grant for would not be money that we would be spending, that I would be asking for us to spend in our budget. But we can definitely work on trying to gather that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
And so that I'm clear, it's not necessarily before Wednesday. You just want a meeting where when we collect all of this data, a meeting so that we can share this information with the board.
That's what I was
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because at
Okay.
some point, some point, we're going to have to realistically look at this. We're not going to be able to just put it off. At some point, we're going to have to put some numbers on some paper, and get to asking and get to try. We're going to have to try to raise money for it, so we need to know what we need.
Yeah, I was just asking for clarity because I heard a before Wednesday, and then I also heard just a meeting. I was just trying to clarify that this wasn't information that you wanted prior to Wednesday, which is in 2 days.
No.
Okay, yeah. Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for providing that clarity. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, I seek a motion and a second to move the items to the board meeting for adoption, 11.34 through 11.39.
So moved. Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded that we move the items to the regular board meeting. As I call your name, please say yay or nay. Vera Perry.
Yay.
Betty Ramsell.
Yes.
Carol McIntosh.
Yes.
And it's a yes for me. The motion passes, 4-0?
Yes.
Seeing nothing further, I declare the special board workshop adjourned. Good night.